Hello, welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Nailway, got Sports 25 to life. And of course, as you can tell, we're talking GPP options for you tonight. And there's some big contests you're going to want to enter tonight. There's a big $300 contest on DraftKings, $100,000 for first place if you got the bankroll for that one. Obviously, all the other normal contests on a big Friday night. So it's going to be a fun one. And Clayton Kershaw finally on the mound after he was supposed to be the other day. And he's really expensive, but actually a little bit cheaper than he was originally going to be in his scheduled start on DraftKings, where he was $15,000. Now he's coming in at $14,500. So, not a huge discount, but he's still the top option tonight. There are some other options that you like in some decent spots, but if you're going to be paying up, you might as well just pay the little bit extra. FanDuel more so than DraftKings, and just to get Kershaw, because especially with Mike Trout less than 100%, he's certainly has the highest ceiling tonight. Yeah,
I generally agree with that. I do think Michael Wacha is my favorite pitcher tonight, though. At 9,000 on DraftKings, I think he's, 9,100 on FanDuel, is that right?
I believe he's 87.
Oh, 8,500.
85.
Okay, so I think, he's my favorite pitcher on both sites price-wise. I definitely think Kershaw has more upside. Wacha's just been really, really solid, though. Over the last month, he's upped his strikeout rate to 25%. His Sierra and ERA have been really solid all year. With the Cardinals' offense behind him, he's been solid. They're facing Kyle Kendrick tonight. I just think there's a lot to like there for a really big discount from Kershaw. I can't argue with Kershaw at all, and I definitely agree with you that if you're spending up quite a bit, I like him a ton more than Salazar, Harvey, Cueto, all those guys. So I think he's definitely the top option there among the high-priced guys. I just think points per dollar-wise, Wacha is probably my favorite guy.
Okay. Yeah, and unfortunately, one other guy that I liked, I know some other people liked as well, Ian Kennedy, now going home for paternity leave. So we don't get him today. We get Odrisamer Despain instead, and he doesn't have the strikeout upside, doesn't have the pedigree. So really, for me, that's now kind of an avoid, not really a guy that I'm looking at. Let's talk about these other top options here, at least price-wise, and see where we're looking here. You've got Madison Bumgarner going to Texas. As we know, especially over the past few years, he's been incredible against left-handed batters. I believe under a 240 WOBA over the past 3 seasons allowed. And very lefty-dominant lineup there for the Texas Rangers. So if you got to pick between him or Carlos Carrasco against Oakland, who last week, I believe it was, faced them, nearly went complete game, dominant type performance, who are you going with out of those two?
I don't really know. That's the tough part for me. Who are you leaning towards?
I'm thinking more, if you're going to play one of them in cash, I think it'd probably be Carlos Carrasco. Did just face this team. He's been pitching well. He's got big strikeout upside. This Oakland offense, as we know, has just been awful over the past month or so. But I think in tournaments, I'm leaning Bumgarner because he does still have big upside. I think a lot of people will be off him because of that hot temperature and the thin air. Texas, a lot of runs been scored there recently. And, he's also had a couple landmines recently. So I think people will probably be more on Carrasco, which makes Bumgarner my GPP guy there.
Yeah, I like Bumgarner quite a bit as a GPP play. He's got massive upside. Texas has been, good but not great. They've disappeared at times. I think he's the option that I would go with. I don't particularly love either one of them. I like Harvey quite a bit in GPPs today, which I hate to say, but I think he's going to be really low owned after basically everybody's got burned by him over the past 4 or 5 starts here, at least once. Washington's a little bit scarier, getting some of these guys back in the lineup like Worth and Zimmerman and Rendon. So that's a little bit concerning, but they've been bottom 5 in strikeout rate and WOBA against righties over the past 3 weeks, and I think there's some upside there. Harvey's strikeout rate's been really low, though. It's one of those things where I don't feel great about him, but at his ownership percentage, because of the price, I think he's a great GPP play. I think he's probably going to be less than 10% owned on some of these sites just because of where his price is, and the guys you can get for cheaper than him have been much, much safer.
Yeah, I'm with you there. His main struggles, recently were with walks. Did much better in last start against the Dodgers, only 1 walk there, but his 3 previous starts, 4, 4, and 5, you don't like. He's a guy I like too. I like the upside, but I'm a little bit concerned about his struggles with lefties, especially with Bryce Harper and now some other guys you mentioned that are healthy now in the lineup. So, I mean, I don't know. It's tough because I just don't know if he has the upside to pay off that tag. But at that cheap a price tag, though, I mean, he's at his low ownership. I don't expect a lot of pitchers to have big performances tonight. So if he could put up, 18-point FanDuel outing, 30-point DraftKings outing, then I think at 5 to 7% owned maybe, he's a nice way to set yourself apart. Other options though tonight, I'm not playing Johnny Cueto against Toronto. I know he's a good pitcher, but first start for Kansas City, tough ballpark in Rogers Center, not a way that I'm going. I don't think Gio Gonzalez is that bad of a play in your tournaments. He's been not so great against righties, but this is a Mets offense that really just hasn't been that good recently either. And he's been consistent. I mean, you look over his last 5 starts. Last one only went 5 innings, but was still effective. Double-digit FanDuel points at least in each of his last 5 starts. So you don't like his price tag necessarily, but he's definitely a guy that you can consider because once you get down to these cheaper guys, there's really nobody that I expect out of the cheap options to post a big game. Is there anybody cheap that you're looking at that you think could surprise us with a 30-point performance?
I mean, I looked at Eovaldi a little bit. I think he's probably the guy that I like the most out of there, but his strikeout rate's just so low these days that I don't feel great about it. I think he's more of a cash game option. He's in the 6s on both sites, so actually 7-3 on FanDuel, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't even like him that much there. I think the 6,200 price tag on DraftKings is playable against the White Sox. I know the White Sox have been red hot, but I just don't think they're that good of a team. I don't think that they're going to keep this up for a super long time. That's the only guy I'm really looking at a ton. David Phelps would probably be the other one, I guess, against San Diego. He's a really small favorite, only 5,300 on DraftKings. I don't love it, but I think that's probably my second-tier cheap option.
Yeah. I feel like if there's one cheap guy that I would look at, it would be Taijuan Walker. Not that I have a lot of faith in him in this matchup. Minnesota's been hitting the ball really well, but we've seen that he does have upside. I mean, he struggled over his past, what's looked like 5 starts, but before then he went through a really nice stretch where he's 30 DraftKings points, 25, 31, 25. So he certainly has the stuff when it's there. We haven't seen it over the last couple starts, but it's also been some pretty tough matchups. I mean, had Toronto, at Detroit twice actually in that span. So Minnesota, much better home offense than road offense, but I think at 6,600 on DraftKings, he's an interesting cheap option that could end up getting you 25 points maybe.
Yeah, the last guy I'll mention is probably one of my favorite pitching plays today after Waka and Kershaw. Jason Hamill I really like today against Milwaukee. It's possible they unload. They're out of 4 of the top 5 guys in their lineup, 3 out of the top 5 by the time that game rolls around.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Arrieta struggled early in that game yesterday against them, but got it going late. Hamill's been pretty good. He's got a 25% strikeout rate over the last month, which is really strong. 8,100 on DraftKings. What is he on FanDuel? 8,200 on FanDuel. I like both of those prices. I think he's a solid cash game and GPP play, honestly.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. One of the guys similar price to him, Wei-Yin Chen.
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy obviously facing a Detroit team that has a lot of power, but they also might have less power by the time tonight rolls around because Cespedes looks like I haven't seen anything official, but he's probably on the move. I mean, this is a team that also strikes out a lot against left-handed pitching. Chen does have struggles with the long ball, so if this lineup is still intact, he's certainly a risky option. But I do like his upside at his price tag against a team that strikes out a lot more than they rightfully should.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, catcher tonight. It's not particularly pretty. I've been looking for guys I feel good about. If you're looking at FanDuel, there's some minimum salary guys you like. I mean, you got Derek Norris down there, Jason Castro. Castro pretty cheap on DraftKings if you're looking for a cheap guy. You got to love Buster Posey against Nick Martinez, but he's really tough to fit. $4,400 on FanDuel, $54 on DraftKings.
Yep.
I mean, he could certainly pay off that price tag in that great matchup, but I'm not sure that I'll be paying to find out tonight. Is there anybody cheaper that you're looking at that you like? I mean, maybe in the middle tier, like a Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the obvious one there. Probably hitting second against Jungmann tonight, 3,700 on DraftKings. That's probably the guy I'm going to be using the most. The other guy I like in that price range, if Matt Wieters is healthy and in the lineup again against Buck Farmer, I think he's a fine play at 3,300. You could look at AJ Pierzynski, I guess, again against a righty in Buchanan, only 3,000. He's probably the other guy I would look at. Outside of that, I'm not really seeing anything I like at catcher.
No, catcher for a pretty full slate is pretty barren tonight. So for
Yep.
me, I'm going with some cheap guys with power if I can't get Posey. And then if not, I'm going to go middle tier and probably go with a guy like Wieters. And even if Wieters does sit, I don't mind Caleb Joseph as a guy with a little bit of power against Buck
Yeah.
Farmer because Buck Farmer is just he's so bad. He was terrible in the minors when they sent him down, and they just had no choice but to call him back up. So it's probably not going to be a very, very nice night for him tonight. All right, first base options. Once again, picking on Buck Farmer. You got to like Chris Davis. He's got a decent price tag on both sites tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Nice tournament option for you there. Other guys to consider, Paul Goldschmidt, once again, pricey, but you get Scott Feldman. I mean, this guy's just absolutely consistent. He draws a lot of walks. He always puts the ball in play. You know he's got big-time upside. Feldman is an okay pitcher, but more of a contact pitcher than anything, so you got to like targeting that. Then a couple other guys, David Ortiz at home against Erasmo Ramirez. Ramirez hasn't been as bad this season as some people think. He's actually been a decent pitcher, but Ortiz actually hitting pretty well over the past week. Has a 4-hit game with those 7 RBIs. He's got 5 multi-RBI games in his last 10, so I think he's a guy that could go overlooked with a lot of other good options on the slate tonight. Another guy that usually flies under the radar is Joey Votto, lefty-lefty matchup. Usually don't like to target lefty-lefties, but he's actually been pretty good, and Jeff Locke is just not a very good pitcher at all. I mean, he's a fringe major leaguer at this point. So I like Joey Votto. I don't love his DraftKings price at $5,000. A little pricey for a guy who's in a less than ideal spot. But $4,000 on FanDuel, I think, is a fine spot for him, definitely.
Yeah, I actually prefer Frazier to Votto, but he's probably more of a third base option for me because I don't like nearly as many third basemen.
Yeah.
They're both 5,000 on DraftKings today. Outside of that, Victor Martinez, I like a ton on DraftKings at 3,300 against a lefty. He's just absolutely crushed lefties over the past three years now, I think.
Something
I mean,
like
he's
that,
he's been just destroying them, and that price is just crazy low.
Yeah, it just keeps dropping. I mean, it's
I know.
insane how low it is.
Yeah, it's really weird. But I like him quite a bit. As one other cheaper option, Justin Bohr. As you mentioned, Kennedy scratched. Despain's starting 2,700 against Despain. I like quite a bit. He's probably my other value option, but I'd much rather just spend 600 more on Martinez, I think, if I'm going that route.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. All right, second base options. You've got to like a guy like Jason Kipnis still. He doesn't have a whole lot of upside, but he can certainly give you a solid game at his price. More so on FanDuel, where he's cheaper at $3,900. One guy I definitely like on FanDuel, his price as well, Brian Dozier, $3,600. Everybody loves to target him against lefties, but he's very good against righties as well. You're going to be hard-pressed to find that much power. You always talk about it specifically in the middle infield. So, if Dozier, with the type of power you can get from him, could really set you apart in your tournaments. Other second base options, Logan Forsythe gets a lefty. He's been absolutely destroying lefties this year. Eduardo Rodriguez, we've seen very good and very bad from him. Not a whole lot of in-between. So you got to like him. And then Neil Walker, of course, lefties, picking on the young Michael Lorenzen, who's allowed a 454 WOBA to lefties so far this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only more top-tier guy I would add to that, Brandon Phillips. I don't mind against Locke either, assuming he's still on the team. When the game starts, he's been pretty good against lefties lately. Outside of that, there's not a ton I really like cheap-wise at second base today. I think it's going to be a position I'm paying up at. I don't mind Colton Wong at 4,100 against Kendrick, but I mean, that's a tough price to pay when you can just get Dozier. If you're looking for someone a little bit cheaper, I mean, Cesar Hernandez is still only 2,900 against Perez. That's probably the way I would go if you're looking for a cheap guy because there's not a lot else there. Maybe Solarte against Phelps at 3,100, hitting second in the order would probably be the other guy I would check out.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think Cesar Hernandez, you can play him at shortstop as well. So if you like that. If we're talking FanDuel specifically, you mentioned Phillips. He's only 2,400 coming off that huge game. And Jimmy Paredes is only 2,500. So make sure Paredes is in the lineup. We know that sometimes he randomly gets days off. But that price is really good on FanDuel. All right, third base options. You mentioned Todd Frazier at first. You definitely have to love him at home against a lefty, especially a bad lefty in Jeff Locke. So he's certainly a guy that's in play. Other options at third base, there aren't a lot of guys in great spots. I mean, you get Donaldson gets Cueto, Arenado gets Waka. Miguel Sano is an okay option. He's much cheaper on FanDuel if you're picking on Taijuan Walker, if you're not a believer in him tonight. Matt Carpenter and Evan Longoria are two guys I'm looking at quite a bit. Carpenter's only $2,700 on FanDuel coming off that big performance, and Longoria is cheap on both sites and gets a lefty once again.
Yeah, definitely. I think Alex Rodriguez is probably my top option against Rodon. I don't really want to pay $5,200 for him on DraftKings, or even I think he's 46 on FanDuel. Is that right?
He is 44.
44, so that's a little bit better. I mean, I probably prefer to play him on FanDuel. It's tough to pay $5,200 for him on DraftKings, but he has been just crushing lefties lately. Other GPP plays, I mean, Adrian Beltre against Bumgarner is okay at $3,200. It's not really a guy I'm really excited about, but as a GPP play, I don't mind it a ton. I think Longoria is a much better play at $3,800 on DraftKings. I don't have to mention Tyler Saladino anymore, so I'll give him one last mention at $3,600 today. I don't think I can play him against Eovaldi at $3,600. I'm surprised he went up so much. They left him at $2,400 for so long. I thought he was going to bump to like 27 or 29 or something like that, but no such luck. Not much I like cheap-wise at third base. I'm going to probably play a ton of Todd Frazier today.
Yeah, I like that. And then one more guy I will throw out there. He's not really cheap, but Luis Valbuena is second base, third base eligible. We know what kind of power he has. He's an awful hitter as far as batting average, but I mean, De La Rosa allows a $3.99 WOBA to lefties this year. Gotta like their lefties, and a couple more we'll get to here in the outfield in a minute. Shortstop options, you mentioned Cesar Hernandez. You can play him at shortstop on DraftKings. Jung Ho Kang actually back as a shortstop eligible on FanDuel. You can play him shortstop or third base on DraftKings. Gotta like him. Lorenzen's been better against righties, but still just not very good. And then Johnny Peralta, he's way too cheap, I think, on both sides, considering his matchup with Kyle Kendrick tonight.
I'll add Brandon Crawford. I like a lot more on FanDuel. $4,600 on DraftKings is too much, but at Texas against Martinez, I feel like he's a really strong play today in GPPs on either side, honestly, even at that ridiculous DraftKings price. You mentioned Cesar Hernandez when we were at second base. I think he's a better play at shortstop just because there's not as much that I like there. Carlos Correa is a solid GPP play at $4,900. I think he'll be pretty low owned against De La Rosa. I think that's a strong GPP play there. There's really nothing cheap-wise at shortstop today. It's like really, really tough outside of Hernandez. I mean, there's guys like Chris Taylor's absolute minimum if he's starting for Seattle again against a lefty, but he's been hitting ninth. Outside of that, I mean, there's not a lot there. Tim Beckham, I guess, against the lefty, and Rodriguez is okay for $2,900. But, I mean, all these guys are hitting way down in the order. It's probably a good day to try and spend up at shortstop also.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Outfield options, I really like Bryce Harper against Matt Harvey for tournaments. Harvey's allowed 13 home runs already to lefties and a 330 WOBA this season. So if I'm playing anyone against him, it's going to be Bryce Harper, especially on DraftKings where he's expensive. On FanDuel, $5,000 is expensive, but it's not too bad. I feel like you might have a decent amount of ownership there. I think being the most expensive player on DraftKings outside of Paul Goldschmidt, I think his ownership will be low, especially in the matchup with Harvey. It's still a tough matchup, but I like his upside. Other guys to consider, still got to love these Minnesota bats. Aaron Hicks, Eddie Rosario, both those guys hitting really well. Both those guys pretty cheap as well. I like those guys. And then outside of that, I mean, as far as top options go, I don't think I'll really be paying up. I like Andrew McCutchen a lot against Lorenzen and Nelson Cruz, but I'm not going to be playing Mike Trout where he's against Kershaw and may not be 100%. He said he's still feeling some effects in his wrist. What's your take on Trout?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not overly excited about him today as much as I would like to at 4,500. I mean, just the combination of him being banged up and facing Kershaw, it's not really worth it for me. I'd rather play someone like Nelson Cruz against a lefty at Minnesota. A couple other guys I like, Jason Hayward at 4,200 against Kendrick, I think is a strong play, hitting cleanup right now. Michael Brantley against Graveman, I think is a good play at 4,800. Gregory Polanco is probably one of my favorite plays today on both sites. Pretty good value on both. Has been just absolutely crushing righties lately, hitting leadoff. Lorenzen, we know, not a great pitcher. at Cincinnati, which is a good home run park. I think Polanco is going to be one of my top plays today.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said, he's a great value on both sides. He's nice and cheap. And Lorenzen's terrible. He steals bases. Neither one of the Reds catchers is very good at throwing out base runners either. So he should be able to. I don't know. It seems like he always hits doubles now, though. So maybe he won't be stealing. But maybe he tries to take third. Maybe he gets ballsy tonight and does that. You never know. Other options, I like Randall Grichuk. Also, I like everyone against Kyle Kendrick. I mean, I would play anyone against him in a tournament. But Grichuk's got a lot of power, and so you got to like him. Otherwise, I like Preston Tucker and Colby Erasmus against De La Rosa. I'm not going to be stacking Houston necessarily outside of maybe a tournament stack, but he's very bad against lefties. He's much, much better against righties. So Preston Tucker especially, where he's really cheap on DraftKings at just $3,600. We know the kind of upside that he has, so I really like him a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I think the last group of guys I want to mention is whatever righties are playing for the Dodgers tonight in that lineup. I think are really strong plays. Especially Puig, I think, is probably one of my favorite plays today against lefty in Santiago. We'll see who else is in the lineup, like Hernandez. Who else am I forgetting here? Guerrero. Yeah. Van Slyke's been a little bit banged up. So it'll be interesting to see what their lineup looks like and where the guys are hitting. Jock Peterson hit 7th yesterday, I want to say. I wouldn't expect him to move back up to the top of the order today against the lefty, so I'm thinking he's going to hit pretty low. So some of these cheap guys could be hitting pretty high in the lineup. So, I mean, it's just going to be the usual. We got to wait and see what Mattingly does with his lineup, but somebody there is going to be a solid value in the middle of the order.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And then a few other guys to mention. I like Dom Brown as a really cheap option at $2,400. Lefty against Williams Perez, who's really struggled against lefties. Brown's finally put together a couple decent games. 17 DraftKings points with a homer last night. 2 games before that, a 3-hit game with a double and a triple. So almost minimum salary. I like him. And then one more guy, Rusney Castillo, $2,600. Been having a nice lineup spot, and he gets Erasmo Ramirez tonight. Homer late in the game last night with a couple hits. All right, and that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our content at dailyfantasycafe.com.